Hey guys, welcome back to the UC Hunting Properties podcast. We're going to bring you an absolute doozy today. I feel like we have a celebrity guest in Jake Hofer. Jake's from the great state of Illinois. A lot of you are going to recognize Jake because he has an uber successful podcast called the Land Podcast. So stay tuned. As always, I'm going to ask you to like, share, comment, subscribe to the channel. And if you really want to go above and beyond, go out and give us a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify. That just helps this thing trend and helps us continue to grow it. So appreciate you guys all following along and listening. And without further ado, let's get into the conversation with Jake Hofer. This is the UC Hunting Properties Podcast, your home for all things recreational land. Our goal, to help you stand on your investment. All right, guys, without further ado, here's our special guest of the day, Mr. Jake Hofer.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. I've been looking forward to this, and I'm really excited to be on here today.
Absolutely. And like I mentioned in the opening, we got some exciting news to share with you guys, and we're no better than it to come from the horse's mouth himself. I mean, we got Jake on here to talk about his new business venture with the Whitetail Academy. Jake, give us a little background on you first, or to start this, because you're kind of a jack of all trades. And I feel like, you know, the old term brother from a different mother, like, dude, other than you living in Illinois, we're basically living a very similar, you know, story as far as our background in the outdoor industry, now real estate, land management, you know, all things hunting and deer and whatever. But I mean, I love your story, and I want our listeners to understand, you know, who you are, where you came from, and honestly, everything you got going on, Jake. But I needed to consolidate it because, like I said, there's only 75 tentacles coming off of this thing.
Yeah. Well, no, it's funny how that works. Of like, in our own core groups, maybe we're a little odd or a little strange, but there's more than likely a guy that's living a very similar life to you that's like, heck yeah, keep going. Which is just really cool, and I'm really glad to get connected here and chat about all that. But my background, I grew up in north central Illinois, and really, I mean, some of my earliest pictures when I'm on 2 feet, we raised whitetail deer when I was younger. So, I mean, cool. I have like a picture of me holding my little bow and, you know, a deer in the backyard because we grew them. And so I grew up around deer. My dad actually is like small claim to fame, if you want to call it that. He actually used to carve antlers, like legitimate replicas, before we have replicas now today. So that was like before antler replicas, he would carve them out of basswood, and like he carved the Illinois roadkill and like some of these iconic whitetails. So you don't really realize that when you're growing up, how strange that kind of is, or like how obscure that is. But like in the basement, my dad's carving the Illinois roadkill, and I have no clue the merit of that and how unique it really is. So definitely just always loved whitetails and have been around them, quite frankly, my entire life. And really up to this point, I've been really thankful to be able to have careers that are all adjacent to that, and really get to talk to people that are like-minded. And I'm just really excited about that. I got my first ever business. You'll laugh. And since we raised whitetail deer, I was my freshman year of college, and I got bit by the business bug. And looking back, I've always liked businesses, but I just, you know, never really realized it at that time. And
well, it's almost an art form of its own, right? I mean, in a sense.
Absolutely. And so I was in my freshman year of college. I was sitting in the dorm. I'm like, what business? I have no money. Like, I maybe have $50 in my bank account, right? Like, what business can I do with no money? And so I ironically read an article on Forbes, and this was like right when Instagram was starting to grow and Twitter was starting to grow, and it was about growing niche accounts. So I was like, well, what am I really interested in? So I started growing some deer hunting pages on Instagram and Twitter. And then I was like, okay, well, I have this captive audience. What can I sell them? I was like, well, we have deer still, and deer pee every single day. So actually my first ever business, I sold deer urine. I collected it and shipped it directly. It was a direct-to-consumer deer urine company my freshman year of college.
I love that, Jake, because I love the concept of any, you know, per se lure or deer scent, because yes, you are selling doe urine or buck urine, obviously is your product, but I always joke, I'm like, no, dude, what you're selling is hope in a bottle. Like, you're literally bottling hope and somebody's buying it.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is, you know, like I got so busy and it didn't make sense to continue doing that. But even, that was 7-8 years ago. I guarantee I'm going to get someone from somewhere in the country say, hey, I can't order a thing on the website anymore. Can I get some? Because they had a good experience.
Sure.
And when I was doing that too, because I know there's more skepticism and people look at that with, down their nose a little bit more. But at that time, I was like, I just don't want to sell a product. I want to be different. I don't want to have something that you can go on a shelf and buy it. So
Sure.
my whole thing was obviously urine starts to break down, within 48 hours. So I wanted to collect it and ship it as fast as possible and get it directly to them. So that's how I got into that. And then it was kind of unique throughout that period. I was like, okay, well, how can I scale this business anymore? I have no money for marketing. I have these little, these social channels that I'm trying to sell and like position it accordingly.
Sure.
And then at that time, that was when blogs were really big. And so I sent a cold email to a company called Wide Open Spaces. They're out of Austin, Texas. At this time I'm a sophomore in college, and I'm like, hey, I want to write for your guys' website, and I have these large followings that are anonymous. I can push out the links to everything. They're like, yeah, go ahead. I was like, oh wow, okay.
Let's roll, yeah.
Yeah. And so throughout that time, I wrote over 700 articles in class at college. Like every time, I was writing 20, 30 articles a month. And my small claim to fame for that, Joe Rogan actually pulled up one of my articles once.
Nice.
Yeah, and it was like, Jamie, pull up that article about the fish with lesions. It was the pay legs for catfish. And I had a friend that was like a huge Joe Rogan fan. He's like, I listened to that episode. I had someone else say, like, as they're scrolling down, you could see Jake Hofer, and it was my article, which is just kind of crazy. So
I gotta ask Jake, because I had no idea, but now I'm just curious because I'm not a religious Joe Rogan guy, but I'm a big fan, and I think what he's doing collectively, like in the hunting space, but for people that maybe weren't in it, like I give him a ton of kudos for what he's doing. So is that the article where they're linking like atrazine back to, males becoming females and vice versa? And...
No, it wasn't that.
Okay.
It was and it was the guy, and actually it's weird how small the world is. It was a guy in Ohio, and he was catching these giant catfish out of the Ohio River and then putting them in a pond. And then, you could go and catch this giant catfish in a pond at his house.
Gotcha.
And they were like, there was lesions and like these pockets and everything on these giant catfish. And I can't remember the article now, but the full circle of that is this. And so like, there was a bunch of like, that article and that clip from Joe Rogan got all sorts of traction in the catfish world, which I don't know anything about.
Sure.
And then full circle with whitetail cribs. We did a whitetail cribs with that guy like 5 years later. And I put 2 and 2 together, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what are the actual odds? And he had an incredible whitetail cribs. The only reason I put 2 and 2 together was because when we posted that cribs, we've done a bunch of those, right?
Yeah.
And that was the only one we ever got major pushback. We're like, you're promoting this guy and all these different things. Like whether you agree or disagree, he's doing everything legally. And, I have no opinion on that. He had an incredible whitetail crib. And it was just so ironic of like,
what are the odds, right?
Yeah, that was the guy that I inherently wrote an article about. And then sure enough, he did a whitetail cribs, and it was it was incredible.
Clearly, he's just one of those dudes that everything he does is big, right? Big catfish,
yes.
Big deer. I get it. Yeah, I get it. Type A.
Yeah. Yeah. And so throughout that process in college, I got my real estate license my senior year of college, and then started selling real estate basically fresh out of college, and actually started as an intern at Exodus. And then, as life goes faster, became a co-owner of Exodus, scaled my real estate business, and then, launched all the different things that we do with Exodus and land podcasts. And I usually try to bite off a big project a year is kind of how it inherently happens. And then now I bought the Whitetail Master Academy. So that's the big project for this year.
Right on. So one question I was going to ask you, Jake, because obviously you just gave me a very abbreviated version of a fairly short window. You're a young dude. What drew you to real estate? Was there a family connection, or obviously something clicked and you said, I want to do this while you were in your college years?
I've just loved land. Grew up, we didn't have any ground, and it's just the same story of everyone across the country. Of as a kid, I could walk out my door and I'd go down the road and walk 3 miles and have permission to hunt all of it, right?
Sure.
And then and throughout that period, it's like, man, I'm gonna have to own a piece of ground someday if I want to do the things that I enjoy now. And so this infatuated with land, and to me, real estate is such a rewarding profession. And you get to help people make a huge decision and help them make a good decision, hopefully. and you get to deal with land, and you're constantly learning, and then you get to meet some of the best people on the face of the earth. I'm very confident in saying that, of
I
small
agree.
business owners, people that made something happen, and they're learning real estate from me, and I'm learning about life from them. So it's just one of those deals where
I
I
love how
got in.
you just said that, by the way. I mean that there's a lot. That's a mouthful, dude. But you are plumb correct.
Yeah.
I'm going to steal that one from you, by the way. Yeah.
You're more welcome
Yeah.
to. And so yeah, I mean, ultimately, it was just like, how can I buy ground? I know realistically, I cannot do it on one source of income, and so I was like, well, I have a lot of interest in this, and ultimately, just started selling real estate. And I think that a lot of people, I got my license when I was 22, and there's some uphill battles as being a young guy, and I'm so thankful for people that believed in me when I was just getting started, and like believed in a young guy. And I think that a lot of people, I had so many people, no one's going to do any business with you. You don't have gray hair. I'm like, well,
Right.
Well, I might have gray hair a lot sooner if I get my real estate license.
I think that goes without saying. Yeah.
Yeah, but no, it's like, everyone always has to say like, well, you got to wait for this, or you got to have this checked off before you can do it. But I've always just been like, jump in, figure it out. You're not, to like your point of like living a parallel life. There's someone out there that's doing the same thing for you, or maybe they're 10 years ahead of you. And I've just met so many great people that are willing to help. And I think that if people just start doing it, and you're willing to pick up the phone and call someone, you can do it too. And this is the mentality I've always had.
Well, and there's some amazing people in all of these industries. I mean, whether it's real estate, the outdoors, how they're kind of blending. It seems like more and more all the time. And it's funny, all the mutual friends we were kind of rattling off when we talked, Jake, but it's, to your point, it does almost always seem like the clients on the real estate side are people that put their head down and really went at something and became successful. And then obviously at some point they're buying or investing in land for a multitude of reasons. But it's interesting to me that you were straight out of college, because I don't think that's the normal, real estate path. I think most people go out and do something and they end up in real estate. But for you to have the vision to do it right out of the gate, I just wanted your kind of 2 cents.
And I had a friend. It's kind of weird. Like this is like 2017, 16 era, and actually like you grow these social channels, and a lot of times you have to collaborate with other like other accounts. And there's a guy in Kentucky, still friends with him today. He got his license, and he was maybe a year or two older than me, and it was already in the back of my mind. And he's like, "Hey, have you thought about getting your license?" And I'm like, "I have thought about it." And he was one of the initial nudges that was like, "All right, I'm going to do it."
Sure. No, that's cool. I didn't mean to completely veer off about the real estate piece, but as soon as you said you were doing that in college, it just kind of clicked with me. I'm like, I'd get it if you said, hey, my uncle ran a firm, or my dad was a broker, or whatever. But I mean, you just plumb said, this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah, my parents bought their house and they live there today.
Yeah,
not one real estate transaction in their life. Yeah,
right. Well, you need to fix that, right?
I've been working on it. No, I take that back. They did buy a piece of ground now. So
I always figured doing business, especially with your direct family, whether it's in-laws or whether it's your actual folks, it's the equivalent of you shopping for yourself, because the next goal is you're like, hey, that's going to be part of the inheritance, right? Like,
right.
This is my farm, kind of indirectly.
Yeah. Let's be really careful what we pick out here.
Exactly. I don't like this draw. No. But Jake, what I really wanted to focus on today, and thank you for the background on this, because I almost feel like I don't even have to introduce you, because the Land podcast and your Exodus podcast have been so big and so successful. I'd love to know the overlap, but I'll bet there's a lot of overlap with, our listeners and yours. And obviously you have a hell of a lot more listeners than we do. So, I mean, kudos on that, because I think that concept of what you're doing on the Land podcast does resonate, not just with real estate people, but I think it resonates with anybody that truly does want to get in the game. And it doesn't matter what level, right? If you're buying at 20 or if you're buying 2,000, what you bring to that and the guests you have on it, like, it's just intriguing. And I don't miss an episode, dude. Like,
I appreciate that.
Yeah, you're like top 3 playlist guy for me. So, all of that said, when I got notice, that you were acquiring the Whitetail Master Academy, I was instantly intrigued, Jake. And
Mhm.
and I know I mentioned this, but I mean, we do some training for our members. And I don't want to say it's more generic, but like, what we focused on is the NDA, or National Deer Association, and their deer steward courses, which I think are awesome. And it's a great baseline on understanding deer and habitat and everything that goes into it. But then when I look at, what you guys are doing over there with the Whitetail Master Academy, like, to me, that is the next level. That is the dude that rolls over in bed and is checking cell camera pictures, in the middle of the night. Like, this is next level strategy and setup and kind of the whole thing. So walk us into that a little bit, Jake, because I mean, same thing. I don't think you jumped out of bed one morning and were like, hey, I'm going to go buy this. I think this is a great idea, but clearly you've seen something. So tell us about it. I mean, give us the soup and nuts of that.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been addicted to learning and learning from people that have way more experience than myself. And it kind of how the deal came together is just really ironic. Don gave me a call one day, and he's extremely successful, and I have a ton of respect for Don, Bruce, and Steve that built the Master Academy. And he's ready to slow down to some regard, and kind of offer that opportunity to Exodus, and then ultimately I decided to buy it myself. And I just look at it of like, okay, well, he's the guy for developing a property or making a plan for a lot of people across the country. And then where my thought went instantly is like, okay, well, with the Exodus podcast, the land podcast, like I've created a lot of great contacts that know a lot in a lot of different parts of the country, right? Or a lot of different nuances of land, right? And so my thought is like, okay, so Don's perspective carries a lot of weight in my mind and a lot of people's mind, as it should.
Yep.
But like I was out in Iowa with Steve Hansen, like he's probably done more equip contracts than anyone on the face of the earth in the Midwest. Yeah. Well, truly, when he said he did, he's like, I don't know, I've probably done over 100. Like it might be 200, right?
Right. Right.
And so it's like that to me is something that hasn't been in the academy, but for the cost of a membership, I mean, if I didn't have the resources or the ability to text Steve a question, like I would pay for that, no questions asked, because as you know, there's a lot of nuances to this. There's a lot of not like, you have to know what question to ask in order to hopefully get the result that you want.
100%. Yep.
And that's where this academy builds out things about CRP, equip, and how to get funding in order to improve your property in a very direct and digestible way. And then beyond that, someone buys Don has kind of said multiple times, like someone's first farm is not as good as their second farm because they learn a lot. Well, how can we make it where their first farm is actually really good and they don't make those mistakes on the front end? And I've worked with so many different buyers over the years, and obviously we get paid if we sell something, but there's a lot of times we're like, man, based off your goals and what you're telling me, I don't think this is the right farm.
Yeah. Maybe not the perfect fit. Right. Yep.
Yeah. Like let's wait for one that checks off a few more boxes. And I think that there's a lot of people that maybe don't have that resource to where they can come on here and like, okay, what exactly do I need to look for and what can I fix? And then, a membership's $200 a year for the premium version. How can you improve your property $200 an acre from people who have actually done it with the track record of like, okay, you definitely need to put up a gate, and like all the different things that go along with that, and ultimately just provide way more value than what the membership is. And obviously, if you're a member, you get discounts on all sorts of good stuff too. So it's like,
right.
You buy it, you can easily pay for your membership, but beyond that, you can make money off the membership from the knowledge that you receive. And it's always funny. There's like a stigma. There's a stigma for paying for information now. Oh, you can find everything for free.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, is your time worth something? Because I've been in this boat, and you have too, I'm sure, where I want to do this on my farm. I'm going to watch a YouTube video. And then you watch a second YouTube video. Well, you probably watched another YouTube video, and that guy's an idiot, and you need to do it this way. Then you watch the third video calling the first two guys jokers. And It's like, well, how do I do this? Because I just want to do it. And I think
and the other side of that, Jake, I mean, because 100% I've been in that exact scenario. You know what I mean? Because a lot of people can be internet experts.
Yep.
And you don't know what you don't know, and not everything's applicable, right? Like what a management technique used in Mississippi may not be even real world in Iowa or Illinois, and vice versa, right?
Yeah.
So I think a general understanding of what to do is one thing, but then when you get down to the nuts and bolts and where you're doing business, like you being in Illinois, us being in Iowa, you better know your area inside out backward. And that's where I'm like, I want to learn what they're doing down south. I want to learn what they're doing in the Northeast. I want to know what they're doing out west, because the general practice is the same, but the real world application may be different.
Yeah.
Anyway, I didn't mean to butt in, but I'm so with you on that, because I almost think there's too much information out there, and opinions are like assholes. Everyone has one. Right. Some are just substantially better than others. So
yeah, and I think that's the other thing too. It's you can go to one location and like Don, Bruce, and Steve have put a lot of really, really good content over the last 2.5 years on there too, like switchgrass, all these different caring for fruit trees, and so that is a resource that you can just go and watch it. You don't have to Google for 2 hours and be more confused when you started. You can just go there, learn how to do it from people that did it, and go beyond. And, that's where it's like as it sits today, it's a really good platform. But obviously the goal moving forward and what we already have in action now is to improve it and get more different people. Like yesterday, I was up in the Driftless region of Wisconsin with a guy named Thomas Milsna. Got to know him quite a bit over the last couple of years. And he has a really good track record. He set the county record twice within 5 years on non-typical
archery. And that's saying something in Wisconsin. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there may be no more competitive state when it comes to hunting than Wisconsin.
Yeah, and it was on a shared permission property with all of his cousins, and it's a big track. But he was telling some of the stories. It's like, I could see where someone would make a straw man argument, like, well, if I had that big of a farm, I could do that too.
Well, everyone says that by default, right? Like,
yeah, but it's like, well, how come none of the other people that hunted it set the county record twice? He's clearly doing something different in comparison to everyone else. So like, this tying in people like that to where you get different perspectives, and we all learn different too. Like, and that get someone that resonates with how you want to learn, or maybe what clicks with you, or maybe your budget, or maybe what resources you have available. Like, I think another thing is like a lot of the content on there is like tractor and a drill. Well, not everyone has tractor and drill.
Right,
So like, what about the guy that has a 4-wheeler, and like, what are the key things there? Because a lot of people just try to learn on YouTube and they fail. And as you know, time is valuable. We only get so many seasons on this earth, and to maximize every single season and get better and learn every single year is something that we all should do. And that's just what I get really excited about.
Yeah, Jake, I'm with you. I mean, obviously time is probably the most limited resource any of us have. And even, sitting here, I'm in my early 40s. I don't know, you're in your 30s, whatever. But it's crazy how fast it seems like time goes faster every year. Yeah. And the more I want to do, the less time it feels like I have, especially with kids and stuff. So, I guess what I'm saying is, I think what you guys are doing with this Whitetail Master Academy and kind of your vision for it, and actually I'd love you to even expound on that further. I think there's a lot to be said, because it is a membership-based academy, and once you're in, you kind of have it forever, right? I mean, you put it in your library. And,
Yep. Every year it renews, and you can go in there and log in and watch all the videos 100 times if you want to. And I think that's something. I mean, so here's the thing too, is there's every month there's a new land plan, and for the next 12 months too, there's a new land plan from Don every single month. Mm-hmm. And so you get to see exactly how he sets up a farm, why. And so you have a whole catalog of different states that he's consulted on. And then you have tree stand locations. So I think there's just so much good information in there. And even here's the thing, the margin of error for whitetails for most of the country and most hunters is pretty narrow. Yeah. And it's like, how many times, like, if I was in that tree, if I would have known now, if I would have known then what I know now, I probably would have killed that deer. So this class helps with that exact scenario. And it's not going to make you magically an amazing hunter. You have to apply this stuff, but knowing how to do it or getting a better idea, more examples, that's how we learn, and that's how ultimately we get better too.
Well, and even I don't want to say putting your ego in check, but like at least putting it in park to get different perspective, I think is how you get to be like master level, like a Don Higgins, So good, bad, or indifferent. I mean, like I said, it's an opinion, but I think it's a very, very educated opinion, and I love that it's not just Don, that you're bringing, a lot of other subject matter experts. Like we talked about Steve Hansen. Yeah. That dude's like a walking Yoda of all things, programs that are applicable to do what we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And even on the hunting side of things, like I always ask him, I think he's probably helped kill more people kill their best deer than anyone else
Oh,
in the country.
it's got to be close. You know what I mean? He's for sure top 3 or 5 or whatever. There's no doubt about it. And he's so humble, you'd never know, that, oh, I've been part of X amount of 200s dying or whatever. And even if it wasn't Steve pulling the trigger or dropping the string or whatever, I mean, well, even your story, Jake, you came to Iowa last year, I think killed your best deer, right?
Yeah.
Steve and I sidebarred about that, but let's talk about that hunt. Cause I mean, Steve, the way I understand it, Steve went in, it sounded like he had a camera issue or something. So he went in to fix a camera and like did a hang and bang style hunt on a new farm, sees this deer. And then like fast forward 30 days, you hunt it and you kill the deer.
Yeah.
But I mean, walk us through that. Cause I mean, it was kind of a cool story, even from Steve's perspective.
Yeah, it was really cool. And I'm extremely grateful. I consider Steve a great friend. And so I was hoping to draw a tag in Iowa, and I didn't draw the year before. And then he ended up acquiring a different farm like in February of the year. And he walked it once before they bought it. And then the very first day we were out there, that was the second time he's ever been on the farm. And we're cutting trails. We're just so we can get the side-by-side around the farm.
Sure.
So it was like, brand new to the both of us. And, we hung cameras, did the whole thing, scouted it out. And then went out on the first cold front of October and hunted and, saw some great deer. And it was just so fun because it was exactly what I wanted. I wasn't like, go sit in this stand. Like I was hunting the farm, but I was able to bounce ideas back and forth with Steve. And it was just, I enjoyed it so much out there. And I tell you what, every time I go to Iowa, it's hard to come back to Illinois.
Well, I was going to ask, is that your first big deer in Iowa, or what's your experience hunting in Iowa?
Yeah, first time I ever hunted in Iowa. I've been to Iowa. I go to Iowa probably 2 or 3 times a year at least. But first time with a archery tag in my pocket, and oh my gosh, it was so much fun. And but yeah, so that first cold front, the very first time I went out there, he hunted the other side of the farm, and as he was getting down, he's like, "I saw a really nice deer, like pretty tight rack," and is this like we didn't have pictures of that deer, and then throughout the season, we did get a picture of him. I don't know, it might have been October 14th or 17th, something like that. And then got another picture of him late October. And then, ironically, I was out there in Iowa and I drove back to Illinois, shot a deer the first sit there. And I was like, all right, I'm packing back up. I'm going back to Iowa. Yeah. And then I packed up and drove straight to Iowa. And it was the first sit back in Iowa. Did a hanging hunt. And sure enough, that deer came through and was able to connect with them. And so it was a back-to-back sits. I killed mature bucks. I was like, man, that's pretty awesome.
See, dude, that's why you have the Whitetail Academy. You're that guy. Yeah.
No, I'm still learning. I had a squirrel leg in my pocket.
That's funny.
but yeah, it was this. It was a lot of fun. And what's most interesting and really cool was, obviously it was an area outside of we're kind of outside of Steve's yard there.
Yep.
And so we didn't really have any contacts and didn't really know the neighbors or anything else. And I shot that deer, and it was probably December, and I got a text from a number like, "Hey, Roger Sapper texted me, said, do these look familiar?" And it was a matched set of sheds, and I was like, "Are you kidding me?"
Off the deer you killed.
Yeah. And then I'm like, "Oh wow, that's pretty cool." And then I was like, "Do you have the guy's number?" And then meanwhile, that guy texted me directly, and he's like, "I found them," and he showed me where they were found the year before, and he actually showed me pictures of the buck I shot in velvet, and this last trip I was out in Iowa, and I stayed in touch with that guy, and I would say his name, but he likes to be under the radar. So
I get it. Yeah.
I'm not being evasive. And then so he's like, "Yeah, you can have the sheds." I'm like, "Are you kidding me?"
That's awesome.
And so I got the match set of the deer I shot in Iowa last year, and so I have this 4.5-year-old set of sheds, and I sent his teeth in. He was a 5.5-year-old buck.
Nice.
And it's like, how often does that happen? You're in a brand new area. I'm in a different state. I don't know anyone in that neighborhood to get the match set of the sheds. And he was listening to the Exodus podcast, and he's like, "I saw the cover art, and then I saw that it was in Iowa." I was like, "Man, that deer looks familiar." It was the same deer. Just bizarre.
Well,
just bizarre.
Jake, you've heard the term Iowa nice. There you go. You got to experience it.
I tell my wife that all the time. I'm like, man, people are kind of grumpy in Illinois. People are so nice in Iowa. People are kind of grumpy here.
That Chicago influence is rubbing off. Yeah, I get it.
It's real.
Yeah, it's
There's
real.
some great people, but it is crazy of just like how welcoming and open arms the majority of people that I've experienced in Iowa And like down here or over here, it is different. Super nice people, but you guys are next level nice. I will say that.
Wow. Oh, I'm blushing. I'm blushing. No, that's awesome. And I mean, you couldn't have been in better hands than
Yeah.
having Steve kind of, I don't want to say as your guide, but I mean as your entry point into
Confidant for sure.
Yeah. He's such a good
extremely
person.
grateful for that.
Nope, that's cool. So what, Jake? Because I think we could sit and BS about hunting the whole time. Couple questions for you. Where do you go from here with the Whitetail Master Academy? I mean, like, how do you envision it rolling out? Like, obviously, marketing's your strong point or your background. Like, what happens now?
Yeah, I think it's just continuing to build. I know it's to continue to build on what is already there and just get different perspectives and really dive into really quality, good information, because that's, just as people, like, you're buying that, like, man, you can watch everything for free on YouTube. I was like, I've tried that and I still leave with asking questions. So the content that we're producing is stuff that answers the questions. And that's where I have a lot of experience with it too. Is like, I've done a bunch of different podcasts, and what happens oftentimes, with whether people admit it or not, and you probably experienced this running your own podcast, you press end record.
Yeah.
And then it's like, and then the good conversation starts, because like, well, I didn't really want to say that because I didn't want everyone to know this, or like, I didn't really want to share this little specific secret because I don't want everyone to know. But it's a very tight knit community, and people are more willing. And like, that's the type of people I bring on. It's like, we're pulling everything to the side. Like, this is completely uncensored, unfiltered, the best quality information you can get. Because a lot of times I learn the most is it's not recording a podcast. It's when you press end record, or when you talk to them 2 months later and you ask them a specific question. And that's what we're providing to this. You get a Rolodex of experts, of information that's archived forever.
Dude, it's the Whitetail Mafia.
It basically is. Yeah.
I love that.
You can be a made man if you sign up.
Right. Exactly. Jake, you talk about your farm, a fair amount on the podcast, and I love that, because I mean, you're not just fake land pro guy. You're not a fake realtor. It's in your DNA, and you're living it. You're doing it on your farm. Give us a little bit on that. Like, I mean, talk about when you acquired, what you've done. Is there programs and projects, ongoing? I know you've done a lot of tree work. I'm just curious on that, because I guess the one thing I've never really picked up on is like scope, scale. Like, I'm not even sure. What's the story on your farm?
Yeah, so it actually worked out really weird. I was there was a farm. If I was on the Master Academy, I'll tell you the full story here. But so there was.
But you got to join.
There was a farm that I had anticipation I was going to get listed, and I was 26, and I mean, I was saving every single penny. I was not making much money, but I was saving every single penny. And this farm got listed, and I was actually in Ohio at the Exodus headquarters, and I was like, dang it, like, I need to get back. So I moved my flight up a day, flew back, walked it, and so I bought my first farm ever. And I think this is probably a really important piece, because I just had a call yesterday of someone that listened to the Land Podcast and asked me this question about buying farms in partnership. And so it was listed, and it was between 50 and 70 acres. And I walked it, and it was in 2 pins. And I was like, Dad, I'm going to buy this farm. Do you want to walk it? And so we walk it, and he's like, man, this is a really sweet farm. And so the long and short of it is, it was 2 different tax pins. So I bought one side, and they bought the other side.
Gotcha.
And there was a lot of me, of like my ego, like, I don't want to do that, because people are always going to say this or say that, and
sure.
I don't come for much. So like, I was actually surprised my parents wanted to buy it, and so I bought that farm, and it's basically a fully timbered piece in a really good neighborhood. And I have like a checklist of clients that say, like, I want to kill big deer, and this checked off all those things that I was most interested in. And so I bought that farm when I was 26, and it wasn't about a week after we closed on that one. I drove by with my wife a different farm. And so I'm like 4th or 5th generation in this little pocket. We've always lived here. And my great grandparents actually owned a farm. It was 114 acres at one point, and it was a multi-generational farm. And they sold it in the 70s.
Sure.
And I was like, man, it'd be really cool to be able to buy that someday. And it wasn't, like a week later that became available. And I was like, man, we just bought another farm, and now it's a house and 40 acres. I was like, wow. I don't know if we can do this. So I called my lender, and he's like, and it's kind of eerie, because I was talking to him when I was like, like, I think I'm probably bought that first farm, and I was like, man, I think I'm probably tapped out. And he's like, well, yeah, he's like, but you never know what comes along. And he's like, you probably have enough margin where something else did come along and it was something you really wanted, or he didn't even know my grandparents used to own a farm, or great grandparents used to own a farm. Like, if great grandma's farm comes up, like, you might want to buy it. And it wasn't a week later. That's exactly what happened. And this is just the crazy part of real estate too. So I bought a farm. So like, oh yeah, I just bought a farm. Okay, we're buying another farm. Like what?
Right. Things
And
are
so
moving fast.
A house in 40, and it was I'm so thankful it worked out. It was a 4 contingent transaction domino that everything had to happen for us to buy this.
And it clicked.
Yeah. And it was like, I had one person like, yeah, they bought a house and they're like, we don't like it here. We want to sell it. And I'm like, okay. So then I listed it. And this is like all why this is going on. And then I was like, this happened. I was like, we got to sell our house so we can buy this house. And those people were selling their house. I was like, have you guys found a new house yet? And they're like, well, like we want, a 3-bedroom, 2-bath on a dead end road, a ranch style house. I was like, well, that's exactly what we have.
Nice.
And so then I was like, okay, we'll sell it for this. And then meanwhile, the people that we were buying this, where I'm at now, they were buying another farm. So like it was just boom, boom, boom. And they all went perfect. There was a couple snafus when you have 4 transactions at once.
For sure.
We all closed on time. It was all good. And we were able to buy it. And I think a key indication for a lot of people with agents that listen to this know it, but like when you buy a house with acreage, you get a really favorable loan. You get a 30-year fixed rate. And so that's when rates were really low. And so we were able to make it happen. So, I own about 75 acres and I've been working on them here, and it's a lot of fun. And so at my house, I've done a lot of different projects. And so this is it's kind of like an oak savanna. There's a little bit of timber and there's, a 10-acre field. And so it's, a lot of it's been brome grass. And now in the last couple of years, I've lost probably 7 of the big oaks because they're giant, hollow, this old oak savanna. So I was out there, I was like, man, we don't really have more oaks coming. And there's one guy that can control if oaks come back. And so, got connected with where this farm's at. There's a rusty bumblebee. And so I was able to get a federal biologist out here.
Oh, wow.
And so actually my other farm is very unique too. It's gorgeous. The view on this farm is incredible. You can see like 15 miles up the river one way, 12 miles down the river the other way, just like gorgeous. And so that was a unique area too. And so I actually had a federal biologist at both farms. And this was when I was still learning. This was before the Master Academy. So I was asking them just, I was peppering them with questions.
Sure.
And I was like, what can I do? Like, what funding's available? All these different things. And so got into EQIP at my house and CRP. And actually, I got into the SAFE program here for my house for CRP. And so that's additional payment, different PIP. You get practice improvement plan, and you get additional payment. So it was really good. And with the SAFE program, I love that because I was able to put a food plot in. I was still able to put warm season grasses in. I was able to put switchgrass buffers in. I was able to put a tree buffer in. And I was able to plant trees and shrubs. Like when I drew that up, that's exactly what I would have done. And it checked off what I could do within that program. So that was awesome. So I got that established. And then now I've planted at the farm, I've probably planted close to 4,000 trees and shrubs. And about all but 750 have been by hand.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that's, it's the farm's going to look, it already feels a lot different in, 3 or 4 years. It's going to look a lot different in, 5 years from now. So, I've been utilizing a lot of these programs that we're explaining in the Master Academy. And I can tell you it's cumbersome trying to figure it out on my own or with even just calling people. And it's super cumbersome.
Even knowing about them, but how they apply and what the rules are and what the maintenance agreements are and how they intermingle.
Yeah.
I'm right there with you, Jake. I mean, I'm doing a CSP program that's got like an extension into EQIP. You know what I'm saying? And it's like
they go in tandem kind of.
Yeah. And there's a lot going on there, so having an understanding of it and being able to fully utilize it's worth a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the other farm too, I just got a forestry plan on that. It took a lot longer than what I wanted, but got that done. And so I'm going to be doing a bunch of EQIP projects with that. There's a lot of, there's a good amount of honeysuckle on it. So get rid of the invasives. And that farm was logged pretty heavily before I bought it. So, reestablishing new hardwoods and, there's actually a lot of natural regeneration already, but
sure.
Just improving these farms. And man, it is so addicting. Like I have an addictive personality to begin with. And thankfully I'm addicted to good things.
Yeah.
and so it's just so much fun, and I don't get much free time, but any free afternoon, free Saturday or anything like that, I'm working on these parcels.
You're doing something right.
Yeah, every time.
No, that I love that you're actually living it. You know what I mean? It's one thing to talk about it, or like I said, be a subject matter expert, but when you're doing it on your own dirt, it's even more, I don't know, special, important, whatever, however you want to spin it. So,
well, and the other thing too is, and this is always it cracks me up. It's you can go on YouTube, right? How to do this, how to do that. I'm like, all right, and then there's never a video of like, you remember that video we did 2 years ago, and this is what it looks like now. It looks like crap, and we did this. No one ever puts that video out,
right?
But 9 out of 10 people need to fix a problem that they did not address at some point. And then that's where it gets really confusing. It's like, oh, I have a bunch of foxtail in my CRP. How do you take care of that?
Yep.
And I know I'm not the only one that has that. And so, but if you Google that, I tried Googling this. I tried looking it up on YouTube, and you get 5 different answers from people you don't even know if they actually have fixed that problem.
Right. And the other thing that I think is interesting, a lot of people don't even know that they have a problem, right? They go in and with good intentions, you know, and whether it's hinge cutting or TSI or they do a logging project, you know, 3 years later, they got prickly ash, you know, up to your eyeballs, and it's so thick you can't even move.
Yeah.
So I like I said, I think what you guys are doing over there with the Whitetail Master Academy is brilliant. I strongly encourage people to get involved. We're gonna, so our listeners know we're gonna try to work with Jake on putting some stuff together for the UC Hunting Properties members. So more to come on that.
Excited for that.
Little foreshadowing, right? You know, the question I was going to ask you about your property, your farms, what's your end goal, Jake? I mean, obviously, you got a farm and a house you're living on. You got your other farm. Like, what is your end goal? I mean, is your end goal to, I hate to use the term flip it, but like, what is it?
Yeah, you know, it changes. My plan changes pretty often. You know, it's a blessing and a curse. I bought a sentimental farm, right? Because I've done a lot of improvements. We fixed up the house, and it's you know, it's like, oh man, you know, like we could sell this and get something a little different, or sell this and we go to Iowa, you know?
Yeah. Hey, we're closed for business, just so you know.
Right. Yeah. Okay. No more agents allowed in Iowa.
No.
And so, you know, my goal is kind of evolving. I think in a perfect world, I'd love to add on to the home 40, and, you know, like that other farm I would be willing to part with. It's really good. I mean, it's a really great hunting farm, but you know, it's funny too. It's when we bought our house, like I knew the neighborhood wasn't that great and the high end potential really wasn't there. And that's been true. And so, but the other farm has more, you know, like a higher quality of whitetails, definitely.
Sure.
And so it's like, but then it's like, man, if I bought that piece, you know, then I could probably, you know, get a couple more deer to a little bit older age class. And so where I'm at, it's in probably more relevant to where you're at in Northeast Ohio, is a lot of these are old farms, and you're probably gonna have one crack to buy it in your lifetime.
Yep.
And so just making sure I'm in that position to do so. Or, I mean, life's crazy. I mean, life is so unpredictable and crazy, and I would never predict I'm in the position I am today 5 years ago. And so it's hard to say, but my end goal is just continue to keep improving properties. Like I'm going to own them forever, and do the things that take some time and just get them moving in the right direction. Because ultimately, like everyone says, like we're the best stewards of the ground. Are we all really the best stewards of the ground, or do sometimes we think solely about whitetails or solely about next season versus 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now? And that's my perspective of like, man, you're planting all those oak trees, you're never going to see them. Well, that's fine. Like I'm not doing it for selfish reasons. I'm doing it for the next generation.
Right.
And so I think that's I don't know, that's part of my ethos. And I think that's something that evolves pretty quickly within land ownership. That's not something I've always thought. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's different when you're on your own farm. It's 100% different, and I don't know how else to even explain it. And until you experience it and get to enjoy it, it's hard to put in words. You know how I think valuable those lessons become. I don't know how else to say it, but good. Well, I didn't mean to put you on the spot asking the end goal, Jake, but I mean, knowing all the sweat equity and work you put into them, I didn't know if like, and oh, by the way, people, you know, in the next 48 months, this farm could be yours, you know? So
yeah, the one farm definitely could be. And in 2 years from now, it'll be a lot better. And that's something to bring up, you know, just from my network, and Steve's been a big influence in this too, is like that I bought that first farm, and I'm pretty tight, right? And I'm like, oh, it'd be nice to put in a road here or do this, do that.
Sure.
And then when I was out there, he's like, yeah, we bought this, a year ago. Or no, there's actually one farm specifically. We were out there like right when they got it. And I think I was on that farm maybe a year or two later, and I saw how much stuff they have gotten done.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, man, I got to get going. And so then I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And so like I brought in heavy equipment, carved out a new food plot, put in a new road, put in a new access road so I could access this other plot. And I did all of that. And that's exactly where I killed that deer, was based off of the improvements that we did. So I think that's an important tie into the Master Academy or any of this information. Like, knowing you should do it is one thing, but doing it is another. And it does make a difference and impact. And ultimately, makes the farm more enjoyable, makes the farm better. And that's why you bought it. Not to say, man, I need to do this and this pony up and make it happen, whatever that looks like.
Well, and it's funny too how priorities change, right? Like, do I get a new truck or a boat, or do I put a road into my farm? You know what I mean? Like,
that's so true.
It'll change your life. Moving on, Jake. So I gotta ask, we're getting awfully close to go time. What's your hit list? I mean, who you hunting? What do you got? What's the story?
Admittedly, I'm pretty behind on cameras right now. We with Exodus has been crazy. We just launched the new Exodus app, and that onboarding process has been more challenging than maybe what we naively thought.
Always is, right?
Yeah. And which is another probably like, it won't be that bad. That's kind of one of my like, I'll figure it out. Clearly, sometimes it's harder than what you think. Sure. So I've been a little behind, but there's a handful of bucks specifically that I'm really excited about. It is nothing like some of the bucks running around in Iowa. It's interesting to me, and I think that's the importance of a good agent is, from where my house is, if you go a small direction in a handful of different ways, the deer neighborhood changes drastically.
Sure.
So I'm still hunting some permission farms and some small farms, and so there should be some really solid deer, and I know of a handful already. Have a sheds of a buck that I was tailing around in Illinois for quite some time. So I'm very excited, and it's funny when like my early 20s, I was like, I'm busy, oh my gosh, it's like these different things. Like I know what busy really means now.
Totally.
And so I'm really excited, and I have it should be a good season. I know there's been, you guys, and especially the south central part or southeast part of Iowa, EHD is a really big thing. And here in Illinois, we haven't really had an outbreak of any scale for a while. But I keep hearing murmurs of more and more of that. Not necessarily in my backyard, but not far from here. And so I'm hoping that, some of these specific farms don't, get pinched for that. But so, but I'm very
excited. I mean, you guys haven't really had a lot of drought stress this year, right?
No, and that's the interesting thing. Yeah, it really
that's scary. I mean, because usually you can damn near follow that drought map and kind of pinpoint who's probably going to be affected by EHD. And this year, I mean, thankfully Iowa caught up. We finally got, a lot of rain this year.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it's all hearsay. Like I haven't found any, dead deer or had any, like wonky bucks on camera that appear that have EHD, but I definitely have heard it from more than one source. And so, hopefully that's not the case, but I'm very excited. I'm chomping at the bit. I've been, it's weird how before I was this fanatical of running cameras, because I didn't own any ground, and now I'm fanatical about working on my farm. I'm like, they'll be here.
If you build it, they will come, right?
Yeah.
No, that's great. And I think we've had a phenomenal growing year. I mean, even from what I'm seeing, just yesterday I got a picture of a deer that I definitively had last year. And looking back in my gallery, I figured it out, and I'm like, dude, he made massive jumps, like 30-inch jump or something.
That's amazing.
Pretty impressive jump. So, all right, more to come on that, Jake. I'm sure you'll keep us posted on as the season rolls.
Yeah.
Are you doing any out of state, or what's your fall hunt schedule this year look like?
I drew a Kansas tag, and so those plans are pretty fluid right now. And then I actually had a friend. I've been putting in for New Mexico I've been putting in for a handful of states, and I've been putting in New Mexico. And it's funny. I told my friend, like, you got to put in for New Mexico too. And he wants to go on a mule deer hunt so bad.
Sure.
And I was like, just put in for the New Mexico elk tag. And he's like, I drew the New Mexico elk tag, and I'm like, are you kidding me? And so he's going to New Mexico, and he's like, do you want to come with, like, and hang out at camp for a week? And I'm like, absolutely, yeah, that'd be a
Absolutely.
lot of fun. So I'm going to New Mexico for an elk hunt as a innocent bystander to tag
Nice.
along, and so I'm really looking forward to that. And then I have Kansas, so it should be a good year. And I like hunting Illinois. Like when people are like, oh, you should come hunt Missouri. You should come hunt this. And I was like, hey, I have kind of a hard time leaving
Yeah.
my area. I'm kind of a homebody in reality. And so, but no, I'm very excited, and I can't believe it's almost September, and it's like a couple more sleeps, and
Yeah.
it'll be go time.
It's like a kid at Christmas, right? Couple
It
more
is.
sleeps.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the New Mexico elk hunt, will that be your first elk hunt, Jake, or have you been out there before?
I went on an elk hike once.
I've been there. I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
I drew I didn't draw. I bought a over the counter Colorado elk tag.
Yep.
And how I explain this now is like, it's like a whitetail guy going to Michigan to deer hunt. It's like, I'm not going to do that again. And so that was like 2019. And
Sure.
so I'm actually going to New Mexico in 2025 with my dad for a rifle hunt. So I'm looking forward to that. So I would say this will be my first legitimate elk hunt where I will see elk, hopefully, and
Sure.
actually hear real elk instead of a bugle tube.
Yeah, I get it. I've done the Colorado over the counter walk in a long way and see a lot of hunter thing. I've been there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was so naive. We had no clue what we were like. It was 100. Someone that knows more and has more experience, I'm sure would have had a different experience, but we were so naive, and we're like, oh yeah, we'll just go out there. And it's like,
My story's the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was young. I was definitely naive. And although we'd put the work in, sometimes being able to interpret a map and look at saddles and topography is probably more important than being willing to climb a mountain, right?
Yes. Yeah. A little bit more brain and less back there.
You got it. You got it. And then Kansas, what area are you hunting in Kansas? You got a connection down there?
Yeah, I do have I have a friend down there that is getting me on some permission ground. And so I drew like the southeast part of Kansas. And
Cool.
so that's been on my short list for a long time, and I'm very excited about it. And man, I know you have some ties to Kansas, correct?
Yeah. Yep. Actually, I drew Kansas this year. I'll be down there. So
okay. What you got? Any advice? Any hot tips for Kansas for me?
I'm no Kansas expert because I haven't hunted Kansas extensively. But of the guys I obviously am around a lot that either live there or hunt there every year like clockwork. The one thing that always comes out of Kansas that I think substantially different than, I don't want to say the rest of the Midwest, but like where I'm at, there's a lot of topography, a lot of hills. I mean, similar to southern Iowa, but even rougher up here in the northeast corner,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
Because this is the driftless. So, I mean, what you were in Wisconsin yesterday is probably kind of like my backyard. But
well, I think it's probably more extreme where you guys are at, depending on
it may be. Yeah. So I think like tactic-wise, the one thing that always stands out about Kansas is like the deer seem like they don't have as tight a core. And you hear about, the deer that was whatever. He was over here Tuesday, and on Thursday, literally 7 miles away, he gets killed, right?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that really doesn't happen where I'm at in Iowa. Like, I'm not saying a deer can't move a mile or get shuffled, maybe a couple miles, but by and large, I think the cores are different because we just have more habitat. They don't have to, have legs like that. So that said kind of leads into, I'm not a huge proponent of like rattling. Like I very seldom here do I blind rattle because I feel like every mature deer knows the game. They're going to come in from the downwind side, and oftentimes you may not even see him. Like you might have got their attention, and he closed 150 yards, but it's so thick he smelt you, you never even seen him. I think Kansas is basically the plumb opposite. I think when you tickle the antlers down there, I think it is very effective, and I think the deer will come from a very long ways away just because the density's not there. And then obviously in a situation like that, typically you're in more open country, you can see them coming. You can be ready or try to make it more predictable. But other than that, dude, like that's the intrigue of Kansas to me is when you tickle those antlers, you don't know if the next state record's coming over the hill or, and you're going to be southeast. I'll for sure be west of you. I'm kind of south central where I'll be hunting, but My buddy down there that's sending pictures, I mean, dude, some of these deer in this open country that he's sending me pictures of is pretty much mind-boggling to me. Like,
Yeah.
I can't even wrap my head around how deer get that big and that old, other than it's just that desolate, right? Like,
Yes.
very few people and a lot of big properties. So
Yeah. This is actually that buck I shot in Iowa. That was the first year I've ever snort wheezed in.
Sure.
Ever.
Yep.
And I was like, man, that actually worked. Wow. And so that was pretty cool.
And I think it's so situational. Like, it's funny you say that. I would much rather snort wheeze at a deer if I have a visual, right? Like,
Yep.
and he's not coming or he's going away or whatever. I'll snort wheeze at him. But and this is just an opinion that I don't blind rattle. I'm not saying I don't rattle. I'll rattle at a deer again to get his attention, turn him, whatever. But my experience is, like, if you want to have a bunch of 2 and 3-year-olds running at you,
It's gonna
blind
be good.
rattle, because
Yeah.
that's what's going to happen. But, like, to have a big, true 5, 6, 7-year-old mature buck, like, I don't think they come to blind rattling, on the upwind side very often. Like, it's just not in their nature.
Yeah. I don't even hardly ever bring rattling antlers in Illinois.
Yeah.
I don't. But yeah, that's the fun part about whitetails, right? You can jump in your truck and you can have a totally different experience hunting the same species of animal, but all these different things. And it's like, to your point, the core principles of whitetail is pretty common across the entire country. But to your point right there, like, the nuances of that
Yep.
are so specific. And actually, someone that is getting added to the Whitetail Master Academy as Tyler Jones. He's with Meat Eater, and they put a hurting on him in Kansas,
Yeah.
and he's from Texas, and just a completely different perspective. When we talk about whitetails, and like, our approaches are very different, and that's the cool part. And so even having people like, that's just a great point to what we're doing with the Whitetail Master Academy.
No, and it kind of plays right into it. But, well, dude, we will stay in touch, because, like I said, I feel like this, or what I'm hoping is this is the beginning of something we can put together for our members, tap into what you guys are doing with the Whitetail Master Academy, Jake, and really try to grow this collectively, because at the end of the day, we have a bunch of deer nuts, just like you, just like me. And the people that are hungry to learn and make improvements, I think what you guys are doing is ingenious. So kudos to you guys, and good luck with it, because, dude, we're over here cheering you on.
I really appreciate that. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to come on here and talk about it. And I'm really obviously ate up with whitetails and learning. And at the end of the day, the more we learn, the better we get, and the more we can help our clients, and the more times we're, like, people think, like, you sold the farm, that's the end of it, right?
Right.
They're going to hit you up with questions, and you want to be a continued resource, and that's just as an agent. And like, even having as a closing gift to some of these guys, like, hey, go. There's a lot of good information in here, and I think it's just key, because if you screw something up, you screw up switchgrass for a year, you got to start over, man.
That's right.
More than likely, and
it can be an expensive screw up, right? Like, don't screw up. Take best practice and roll.
Yeah.
So no, it's Jake, like I said, can't thank you enough. We love what you're doing on multiple fronts, and looking forward to working with you, man, and moving the needle on this. This is great.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate. I tune in your guys' podcast every now and then too. So when I'm working, I was like, "What do these guys got to say here?"
We're
and I
just
listen
small
and enjoy
potatoes
it.
compared to that land podcast, man.
No. Yeah. Well, I started that just because I want to learn, and so my MO has remained the same, just trying to learn and get better, and let everyone get better along the way too.
Well, keep doing it, dude. You do a great job with it. But Jake, can't thank you enough. We'll sign off, and like I said, buddy, we'll stay in touch.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.